you've even seen
Yeah,
a spirit animal that one time you said, what was it,
it was a panther.
there was a panther that was suddenly just staring at you in was it the kitchen?
Yeah, yeah, it was the kitchen of the old house.
Welcome to Unraveling the Unexplained. My name is Kat. I'm a longtime astral traveler and spirit consultant. This is my brother John, longtime fan of the creepy and the paranormal.
Evening, folks.
He has picked out a video for me to react to. I don't know what it is, but we are about to find out together. All right.
Skinwalkers have become one of the most feared creatures in all of folklore, but they are seriously misunderstood. If you spend a lot of time looking at creepy things on the internet, then I guarantee you've heard the term skinwalker thrown around a few times.
So what exactly is a skinwalker, like technically speaking?
Okay, so
It's not a cryptid, right? It's
my understanding of them is very limited, and again, like he says, mostly based off of like what I've read in creepypastas, heard on little spooky things online. What I understand, there's some sort of shapeshifter related to Native American lore.
Okay.
Like Native American witch doctors who take the shape of animals or something, but like that's the vaguest thing I know about them.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty vague, and that's about as much as I know too. My understanding was it was people who could change shape.
Yeah.
Or that maybe got like stuck in some kind of way where they have to change shape or something. So it's more like
something like that,
an
like,
indigenous version of werewolf, only more free will oriented.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and like in terms of how it's presented in a lot of the creepy stories you find on the internet, they're practically interchangeable with all sorts of like. I think sometimes people get them confused with the Wendigo or whatever, or
Okay.
just or the Dogman or other weird stuff like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what it says. Maybe
These representations of the legendary cryptid have strayed far away from their roots in Navajo folklore. A skinwalker, known by the Navajo as Yinaldlushi, is an evil witch that's chosen to forsake the values and morals of the society he or she resides in favor of a wicked, depraved lifestyle. A skinwalker's primary purpose is to spread chaos and invert the social order, using their powerful magic for nefarious purposes, like spreading disease and disrupting the most sacred Navajo rituals. They are despised as well as feared, so today we're uncovering their very messed up origins and listening to some folktales shared by the Navajo people. There are a lot of misunderstandings surrounding skinwalkers thanks to Hollywood reducing them to Native American werewolves and the internet taking this misrepresentation and running with it. Another huge
Yeah, that's what we just said. Is I've seen different stuff about it and I'm like not even sure what the real stuff is.
Yeah, it's kind of distorted.
I'm glad he's about to explain a little bit.
contributing factor is the Navajo people's reluctance to discuss skinwalkers at all, let alone with outsiders, as many believe that discussing them attracts their attention. It's absolutely their right to do that, but when curious outsiders can't get answers, they're naturally going to make up their own. With that being said, we here at
I do know that the Navajo actually call themselves the Dene.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I guess Navajo is actually a different name for them that got picked up and used by white people. It was actually like a different culture's name for them originally, and it's not their own name for themselves.
Yeah, sadly, I don't know much about Native American history or culture. So
there's a really cool YouTube channel actually, and maybe I'll link it in the description for people who are interested. This old Dene guy who talks about like the old ways and stuff. I think his grandson like records him talking about it, and he says it in his original language and then also in English so that it can spread it. It's really cool. I'll send it to you, and I'll link it in the description for people who are interested. I'm happy to promote that. He's a real cool guy.
Messed up origins want you to feel that you can trust us to not spread more misinformation. So our resident historian Meredith Walker used the closest thing to first-hand accounts that are available during her research. So first and foremost, skinwalkers are not lichens, man-cheetahs, or any other kind of human-animal hybrid.
Man-cheetahs?
They are Native American magic users who have committed themselves.
Have you ever heard of man-cheetahs?
I have not heard of a man-cheetah.
We gotta find a video on man-cheetahs now.
I'll add it to the list.
Add it to the list. Man-cheetahs. must know more.
To the ways of chaos. They represent the antithesis, the exact opposite of Navajo cultural values. While community healers were known as medicine men and women, or by other positive terms in their respective indigenous language, witches were seen as evil. They conducted harmful ceremonies and manipulative magic as a corruption of the good work that medicine people traditionally perform. They had the knowledge and ability to do good, but deliberately chose the opposite, engaging in taboo behaviors like murder, cannibalism, incest, and the desecration of anything that Navajo society held sacred. According to anthropologist Clyde Kluckhohn, in order to become a skinwalker, you had to know a skinwalker. And to be accepted into the secret society, you must willingly commit the most evil act of all, the murder of a close family member. Usually a sibling. Your initiation ceremony would take place in a cave at night, like all skinwalker ceremonies. Participants would sit in a circle surrounded by...
I don't know. That's not that difficult to imagine. You know
The way
something?
they get on each other's nerves sometimes.
Look, most murders committed by somebody you know. That's statistically true.
There is a lot of murder within family.
Yeah, most that stuff takes place committed by somebody you know.
piles or baskets of corpse flesh and rows of human heads, and they were completely naked except for the masks and jewelry they wore, and their bodies were painted in ceremonial fashion. For the next few hours, they would chant ritual songs backwards, make sand paintings, despite the Navajo considering that a strictly daytime activity, engage in cannibalism and necrophilia, and would even urinate and defecate on sacred Navajo symbols. While Navajo rituals were performed to maintain health, order, and harmony with nature, a quality they know as hojo, these skinwalker ceremonies were chaos manifest. By acting in a way that directly opposed nature, they created imbalances and unleashed evil into the community with the hope of causing social unrest, illness, and death. This is how skinwalkers gained their power. They grew stronger, healthier, and richer by making others weak, sick, and poor. Medicine men had the power to suppress this evil and some of its symptoms, but
That sounds like what a lot of people do.
Yeah. Like that's just a symptom of certain societal issues.
Yeah, making yourself rich, powerful, and more whatever it's by making other people weak and poor.
Yeah. Only this is the magic version.
Some of these people are skinwalkers.
depending on how deeply rooted the imbalances are, they might not be able to cure it entirely, which is what makes skinwalkers so dangerous. This initiation process also granted new powers to the skinwalker, allowing them to perform certain kinds of dark magic on their own and even transform themselves into a number of different animals. This is where the aforementioned confusion with werewolves comes into play, so I want to be very clear about how skinwalkers are different. The fundamental difference between the two is that werewolves are, more often than not, portrayed as victims of their condition, while skinwalkers volunteer for it and have control over it. Skinwalkers can choose to anamorph into coyotes, wolves, foxes, cougars, dogs, owls, crows, and bears by wearing the skin of said animals, hence their name. They can walk in many different skins. This also applies to the Navajo term for skinwalkers, Yinaldlushi, which translates to something like, by means of it, it goes on all fours. Another important distinction from werewolves is that skinwalkers don't usually attack people in their animal forms. Their main reasons for anamorphing are to traverse land more effectively, be that quickly or quietly, and to disguise themselves. Instead of attacking you directly while disguised as a bear, their methods were lower key, like shooting bad medicine darts at victims or placing curses on them using magic. And those curses could range from causing insanity to making you more accident prone. So now that you know what skinwalkers are, and just as importantly, what they're not, I say we dive into some skinwalker stories. Our first tale can be found in a book called Along Navajo Trails, Recollections of a Trader 1898 to 1948. That trader was named Will Evans, and during his time living in New Mexico, he put an unusual amount of effort into preserving what he learned from his Navajo customers and friends, including stories, superstitions, and religious practices as he understood them. One such story came from a customer who Evans refers to as Tall Man. He mentions a peculiar neighbor from his childhood named Many Goat's Uncle. According to Tall Man, his whole neighborhood suspected Many Goat's Uncle of being a skinwalker, so they avoided him at all costs. Trades were kept to a minimum, and he was excluded from community rituals. It should be mentioned that no one had any proof of his skinwalker ways. It was all secondhand stories and hearsay, but whenever a tragic event occurred, he was blamed. Someone would get sick, seemingly out of nowhere, and the medicine man's methods would fail to fight the illness, and so the medicine man would say, well, Many Goat's uncle must have thrown one of his bad medicine darts.
So it was a witch doctor hunt.
Right. Does kind of sound like maybe this was just a situation of we need a convenient way to blame why certain medical practices aren't working. Or if something bad happens, a convenient scapegoat.
Yeah.
Then they'd cut the skin of the patient to suck out the bad medicine. As time went on, the community's fear of Many Goat's uncle grew, and at one point, rumors circulated that he had taken the form of a coyote, dug up the grave of a recently deceased infant, and devoured its body. Then he supposedly used that baby's hair, clothes, and bones to make the bad medicine he placed in his darts. So whenever a coyote howled at night, the young people would cower and hide, while the older folks would say, "There goes Many Goat's uncle. I wonder whose baby he'll get tonight." And to those wondering, why wouldn't they just kill this guy if he was so evil? The main reason was out of fear. To threaten a skinwalker's life could make him dead.
That was literally not what I was wondering at all.
What were you wondering?
I was wondering why they'd be so mean to some poor guy.
Well, I think, again, it's just a matter of you need somebody to blame for stuff that's happening.
Do you,
and
though?
if he was already kind of like maybe a surly dude that nobody in the community liked, he's just a convenient target.
I sometimes wonder whether or not throughout history people like this were really just, back in the day, like, people didn't understand things like autism, so people who were a little different or, you know what I mean? Like,
and
it always makes me sad wondering about stuff like that.
It's kind of a similar echo to how things were with like witchcraft.
Yeah, exactly.
The slightly odd lady gets blamed as a witch.
Yeah. But I was not wondering why nobody killed him.
Desperate, and who knew what kinds of magic he could produce to save his own skin? So instead of attacking him directly, they try to create good medicines that were strong enough to combat his. Besides, according to Tall Man, the storm god saved the people the trouble of killing him anyway. One day, Many Goat's uncle was riding cross country, and when he passed through a gully, a black storm cloud formed over his head, and a bolt of lightning struck him off his horse. Then a torrent of rain poured from the sky and washed his body deeper into the gully, where it was buried with mud and trash. Was this the god's way of punishing him for being an arbiter of chaos, or just an unlucky coincidence? The Navajo themselves couldn't say for sure, but they were grateful that they no longer had to fear the mysterious skinwalker. Our next story is a bit more gruesome than that one. Actually, a lot more gruesome. It comes from a book called Some Kinds of Power by Margaret.
It's a lot more gruesome than eating baby corpses. Dude.
K. Brady, who collected skinwalker stories directly from Navajo children. This one is closer to a ghost story or a folk tale with a lesson to learn at the end. It follows a family of 5, a father, a mother, a daughter, a son, and a baby boy. The family lived in a little house way out in the Utah boonies, so whenever they needed supplies like food, blankets, etc., they would have to ride out to the trading post, which was roughly a half-day's journey. According to our young storyteller, the parents and daughter headed out for one of these trading post runs just like they had countless times before. And they left their son, who we'll call Ushki, to take care of the baby. Maybe not the wisest decision, but the baby was a year old, so not a complete newborn, and Ushki had proven that he could be trusted watching over him for a little while. Plus, he invited a friend over to help. While the boys were alone and the baby was sleeping, they heard some scratching at the window, but when they looked outside, they didn't see anything. Then they heard a knock at the door, but when they opened it up, no one was there, so they locked it and went back to their business. When suddenly, they heard pounding at the door. Someone wasn't knocking to see if anyone was home, they were attacking the door, trying to break it down. In a panic, the friend opened the back window and climbed onto the roof of the house, but Ushki was too afraid to leave. He crawled under the bed and closed his eyes tight, waiting for this nightmare to end. The pounding at the door was relentless, and so was the baby's crying. In his panic, Ushki had forgotten him on the bed, and now he was too paralyzed with fear to step out and rescue him. Just when Ushki thought these nightmarish noises couldn't get any more deafening, they stopped all at once. But even still, he didn't move a muscle. Ushki stayed hidden under the bed for what felt like hours until the dead silence was broken by more knocking at the door. But this time, it was gentle, and he heard his father's voice on the other side asking to be let in. Unsure if this was some kind of black magic fuckery, Ushki hesitantly crept up to the door and pressed his ear to it. When he heard the voices of his mom and sister, he finally felt safe unlocking it. But this nightmare had only just begun. because the moment that Ushki's father stepped inside, he let out a blood-curdling scream. And when Ushki turned around to see what had scared his dad so much, he saw his baby brother lying on the bed, in a puddle of blood with his head missing. He told his family about the pounding at the door, but insisted that he never heard anyone enter the house. Upon hearing this, his dad stepped outside to investigate and spotted a blood trail leading away from their property. At this point, the father, who we'll call Hastine, went to town and gathered some friends to do some skinwalker hunting. But even for Navajo, this was not an easy trail to track. Lucky for Hastine, there was only one house within sight of the track, so he and his buddies figured that had to be where the person who murdered his son was hiding. But when they knocked on the door, they were surprised by who was on the other side. They were warmly greeted by an elderly couple who hadn't seen anything suspicious that day. Then they entered the house, and it was here they found their answers. One of Hastine's friends took notice of an old tattered rug, and when he lifted it up, he found a cellar door hiding underneath. Hastine cautiously approached the cellar door, opened it up, and climbed down the steps, while his friends waited up top with the old couple. The cellar was freezing cold and pitch black, so Hastine couldn't see anything. But after his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he noticed a figure standing in the corner. He called out, demanding they identify themselves, but they gave no answer. And as the room...
Blair Witch, Blair Witch.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. It's like, look out behind you.
What happened to his friend that went onto the roof? Is that what we're about to find out? Okay, shut up, cat. Watch the fucking video.
continued to brighten up, he saw it. On every wall of the cellar were shelves filled with decomposing human heads, and the two freshest heads that sat directly over the figure's shoulder belonged to his infant son and Ushki's friend. When Hastine recognized them, he immediately shot at the figure, but his bullets had seemingly no effect. Then, right before his eyes, the figure began melting, or at least that's how it appeared. He shrunk down to a fraction of his normal size, taking the form of a fox, and then he darted up the cellar stairs and out the front door. No one had gotten a good look at his face, and the old couple refused to reveal what they knew. The basement of body parts was enough for Hastine and his friends to find the couple guilty of that night's crime, so they shot them dead and made their way back to town. Believe it or not, this disturbing story does serve a purpose beyond spooking ya. Little kids hearing the story will remember that Ushki allowed his baby brother to get killed when he left him behind while he crawled under the bed. And hopefully they'll learn not to make the same mistake. But adults can learn some things too, like not to leave your kids unattended for extended periods of time if you can help it. Because the world is unpredictable, and you never know when your kids will find themselves in a dangerous situation they don't know how to handle. You can basically think of the skinwalker as filling the role of the big bad wolf in Little Red Riding Hood. But I swear, they're not werewolves. Apart from their animalistic similarities, both are a metaphor for the evils that one can encounter in this world, and the other characters teach us how to respond to that evil.
Who's to say if that kid hadn't just taken the baby with him under the bed, that they wouldn't have just both ended up with their heads on the shelf?
I mean, yeah, who knows?
So maybe the moral of the story is to make sure to leave your little brother as bait. Or send your friend out the window.
Or maybe the
roof.
lesson is that when you leave your kids alone for a while, make sure you leave a gun behind so they can protect themselves.
Oh, that's not a good lesson. That's a terrible lesson. Don't do that lesson. What the hell?
Well, I said lessons can be interpreted in different ways, and some of them may not be.
Or it could have been, don't answer the door for people you don't know. Like nobody. If you live in an isolated cabin prairie house, who's knocking on your door?
Yeah.
Nobody that should
Well, to be
there.
fair, the kid didn't answer the door when he heard the banging. He went and freaking hid under the bed.
He answered it the first time.
Did he? I don't know.
Yeah, he opened the door. That's how you let them in.
Oh, so like they got in and then started just banging on stuff?
I don't know, but I wouldn't have answered the door at all.
Yeah, a little bit deeper than the Native American werewolf portrayal that Hollywood is so fond of. But the good news is, now you can call out that BS when you see it. Same goes for those corny skinwalker sighting videos where hosts are calling white guys high on bath salt skinwalkers because they haven't done so much as read a Wikipedia article's worth of research. But hey, it makes good content.
Okay. Did someone just film their mostly naked cousin crawling around the backyard?
I guess.
I mean, I would be scared if I saw that coming down.
I think that's scarier.
I just wouldn't think skinwalker.
If you had some deranged, very pale-looking, half-naked dude crawling around your backyard,
yeah,
you'd be scared.
My thought might not be skinwalker.
Some half-naked dude crawling around your backyard howling at the moon. It's time to call the police.
Then for kids staying up past their bedtime, right? So tell me, got any thoughts on skinwalkers you'd like to share? Did you know anything about them before this episode? And if so, where did you hear about them?
Okay, so we will link this video in the description. You guys go show them some love. Check out the channel. They appreciate that. So do we. I'm gonna minimize this and get this out of here. Like, I'm not really sure what to say about that. I mean, all cultures have myths and legends and ways in which they tell their stories, right? And there's a big part of me that thinks that it's easier to blame shift some of the bad things that happen, right? Like in that last story, it's harder to believe that maybe the kid who got left alone with the baby just lost his mind over the crying and attacked his brother. Or, maybe it's, your uncle or your friend or your husband that's disappearing children in the woods. There have always been bad people who do things, that we find that society finds revolting or not good, undesirable behaviors like that. And I think a lot of myths and legends arise out of the need to explain that.
It might also just be like a way that they had an easier time coping with the notion because, sure, nowadays we have psychology and various criminal sciences that study serial killers and other people with like schizophrenics or anybody with some sort of mental illness that has them behaving in a disruptive manner. And back then they didn't know brain science. So that kind of stuff, like, they're evil witch doctors, they're witches, they're lycanthropes or vampires, or in other cultures it might be yokai or whatever. But like the explanation was like they just had to be some sort of creature or dabbling in dark forces.
Yeah.
That was a way to explain the fact that some people have things going on in their head that make them act out in that way.
Yeah, like I think a lot of myths and legends and things like that arose out of humanity to explain away human behavior.
Now, what I am curious about is that you, of course, you do experience and believe in various things that people might interpret as supernatural. I've always been a little curious about like magical practices and, are curses actually a thing? Is there even a potential small kernel of truth?
Is there such a thing as baneful magic? Is that what you're?
Well, yeah.
I'm trying to get at the heart of what your question is. So, like,
the heart of my question is first, is there any truth to the notion of like a metaphysical means of negatively affecting people, and is it conceivable that somebody who also has the mental problems of being a serial killer or just a disruptive individual would also have learned those kind of things, and hence that could have been some small kernel of truth to the notion of like a skinwalker?
So I'm going to kind of talk about this question in a couple of different stages. Okay, first, it is possible, at least in my experience, in astral states and in dream states, to shape shift, to take on other forms. It is possible. I have come across, for lack of a better word, what people would call a spirit animals, and you've even seen a spirit animal that one time you said, what was it, like
it was a panther.
There was a panther that was suddenly just staring at you in was it the kitchen?
Yeah, it was the kitchen of the old house.
Right. So there are beings who can take animal form, who do show up in your dreams. I've shape-shifted in dream states, depending on who I'm working with in a dream state in order to come across in some kind of way. So that is a thing that's possible. As far as people shape-shifting like physically here, I don't know about that. Like I've never seen anything like that happen. So I can't really speak as to whether or not that's a physical thing that can take place. So that's kind of where I am with the animal shape shifting. That is a metaphysical thing. It can happen in dream states, lucid dream states. It's certainly we can do it in an astral state, working with people, and there are spirit animals that come through in various ways. Now, as far as like the bad juju, yes, there are baneful magics, things that practitioners do to and again, I'm not familiar with indigenous practices in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know about that. Like different cultures have different ways of doing things. Um, as far as I've ever come across, there is baneful magic. People do practice it. Generally speaking, most people will keep this to say like a binding. Does that make sense? So let's say you had a person who had a lot of negative energy and was being really gross at work and treating somebody really badly, or they,
Mhm.
that type, but they had their negative energy that they're putting out all over the place. You might do a binding that keeps that energy into themselves. And what happens with a binding like that is that their own negative energy feeds back onto them. Now, that's not anything I would ever mess with. I believe in free will. If people want to be in a negative place, they can be in, it's really your own negativity or your own thought processes. However, you're being the harm you cause that is your mental state. You're really harming yourself. But I do know of practices where that's been done, to other people to help bind the harm that they might be able to do energetically to themselves instead of radiating it out to other people. There are other kinds of uh, curses, for lack of a better word. My understanding of how energy works, though, is if you believe you're cursed, then you will experience the effects of that curse. But let's say you're a person who has very clear, very positive energy. Let's say that you don't radiate that energy at all. Like if you're not in that headspace, if you're a person that's not, if you're walking around your day-to-day life happy and minding your business and doing your thing, stuff like that is going to bounce off of you. There are natural defenses that you yourself as a spirit, as a construct, an energy construct, have against stuff like that. So if you were radiating out in your own way, other things like that are not going to affect you. And honestly, the effects of it are far more likely to bounce back on the person practicing it. So I don't mess with stuff like that. It's never worth it to me to take out my anger or whatever on somebody else in that kind of a way. Like, I would never want to use my energy or my abilities to craft something negative against people like that. But if you're operating in a culture or in a system where you believe you can be cursed, then you probably will be. The best way I can say it, like once I was working with a girl in her dream state, and she was very insistent with me that she wanted me to read her bones, tell her fortune, show me, she was worried about a situation. And I tried to tell this girl in the dream, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to read, you don't want to do that. But she was very, very insistent. And I told her, okay, take your glasses off and let me look at your eyes. So I looked at her eyes for a minute, and if I could already tell she believed something bad was going to happen, right? So I don't need to read bones or read your tarot cards or read anything like that when your energy is radiating that art. If you believe something bad is going to happen, it's going to. So I already knew if I throw the bones down, it's going to say something bad is going to happen, right? Because that's the energy you're putting into your life, into your situation. So in that particular dream, what I did instead was, and this sounds silly, but I gave her a pair of underwear that I drew symbols on. And so here, these are your magic protective underwear. If you feel like something bad's gonna happen, put these on and nothing can touch you. And are they magic protective underwear? No, it was a dream, and I don't even know where the underwear came from. But the point is if you feel protected, like I gave you some protection, now you feel protected, and that's the energy that you're giving out. The idea was just to turn her energy around for her, right? Here's your magic protection. Now you're protected. And as long as she believes that, that's fine. Because there was no convincing this girl in her energy that she wasn't cursed, that something bad wasn't going to happen. So it really, your best defenses for any of that is how you're cultivating your own energy, your own belief structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I guess it just explains the possibility that somebody might have, yeah, at some point, who knows? I mean, when I look at these things, I always try
Mhm.
to wonder if there is like some tiny grain of potential truth to them. So
There certainly is within a culture where that's the belief structure and that's what everybody's operating on. Like if the whole culture is operating on you can be cursed by these witch doctors that are running around, then certainly there are going to be people who do those curses, and there are going to be people who are affected by those curses because everybody is believing that that's what's happening, right? And so things will play out in that way.
Yeah.
Believe in your own energetic ability to protect yourself. You do have certain defenses against that, and there's nothing more detrimental to you than your own fear, your own hate, your own negative emotions, your own belief that you're cursed. Like there are people out there who probably lots of people curse them, certain politicians who don't believe in that and think they're the best thing in the world and go about their business, and no kind of curse is doing any kind of good, right? Because the personal belief in your own resilience that stuff is bouncing off of you, because you're just not accepting that in your reality. So
all right,
that's what I got on that situation.
Sounds good.
Did you ever figure out what your panther was trying to tell you?
No, that was completely incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, most dreams are. Sometime we should do one on like dreams and that type of thing.
Maybe so, yes.
Anyway, like, subscribe, let us know if you've got suggestions, throw them in the comments, and we will see you guys next time on Unraveling the Unexplained.
Have a good evening.